All right, so we've got three more. Thanks for hanging in. You guys are going to go home with some cereal and some sage planters tonight. Paul Change Wilson, where are you, my friend? So Paul also has a little station in the back. If you want to mingle later on, he might be there. If not, he's here on stage with you now. Greg is going to be driving the presentation. So Paul, whenever you're ready, I'll reset the clock.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Greg, for doing that. How you all doing this evening? You good? Yeah, great. So I'm from out of town. In fact, I'm from out of country. I'm from a little place in South Africa called Cape Town. Any of you been there? Yeah, great place, right? Yeah, you're a cheese and wine kind of guy. I can see it. So yeah, we're basically in San Francisco. Maybe a few seconds about myself. Really, change has been the subject of my life since I was a kid, exploring what it's about. South Africa went through some very big change. Of course, some of you might know about Nelson Mandela, or Madiba, as we like to call him. So change has been a really big thing in my life. And what I've found transitioning from kid into adult is that I've been able to make a pretty good career out of not only talking about change, but making change happen. And that career has taken me all over the world. I've lived in many countries, working with Fortune 500 companies, really just how to transform, how to transition. I was on a world tour, a speaking engagement tour 2 years ago, and I got this very unsettling photograph on my Facebook page. A kid from Syria, he was on his deathbed. He said, "Hey, when I die, I'm going to tell God what's happening here." And that really upset me. And I went to The Hague in the Netherlands. I think the gentleman in the corner might be from the Netherlands. Okay, close enough. All right. So I went to Den Haag, as they call it, The Hague, and I wanted to find out what is The Hague doing about change in countries, war-torn countries? What's the story there? Because as a consultant, after 20 years, I've got a pretty good idea how it happens, and I just couldn't figure out why is change not happening in countries where there should be change. And I went to a place called the Peace Palace, huge monument to international peace, where they've got the International Court of Arbitration, the International Court of, International Court of Arbitration, and anyone else know what the other one is? Yeah, anyway, it escapes me for now. So these two courts sit inside the Peace Palace, which is the home of the United Nations, who have since moved to Switzerland. And I researched their reference material. I could find nothing about a change methodology. What do we do when we get people to stop killing each other? There was nothing. I found one paragraph that summed it up in the Oxford Encyclopedia of Peace. It said, "We don't know what to do." All right? And we find that again and again, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to change. We're looking at of course, the presidential story right now. And of course, President Obama sold himself as the change guy. He wrote the book about change. Lovely book, great guy. A couple of great changes over the last 8 years. The fact of the matter is, was that ever measurable? Was that ever auditable? The answer is no. So we find that organizational change itself, people have got some ideas. There's a whole bunch of PhDs about this subject. But this is not really getting us to the places we want to get to, either as individuals, as organizations, as countries, as a global population. Now, I've heard tonight a couple of great stories that are about change. The common theme is change, whether it's undoing what we eat or what we find in shops, whether it's going back to clean environments. It's all about change. Everything is about change. So out of the Hague, I formalized basically an institute, the International Organizational Change Management Institute. Got a whole bunch of people from around the world with over 900 years of experience across 122 countries, fluent in 18 languages. And we asked ourselves, what are the principles and practices of change? Anyway, so over some time, we put together a standards document, principles and practices. This is how you do it. All right, so we've taken it a step further now. And what ChangeNexus is about really is it's an enterprise application or it's a personal application. We're selling it to enterprises, $107 a seat. We are targeting 7% of the employee workforce to be change agents. In other words, to buy a license for 7% of the workforce. That's approximately $532 million per year if you just look at the Fortune 500 companies. So we're looking at some pretty big numbers. We're very excited at ChangeNexus to have a very, very strong association with the IOCMI to be able to work, to be able to build an international change management office, wherever there needs to be an office. So we're going to be linking up technology and change on a large scale. But yes, the individual can also use ChangeNexus. I'm going to ask if I can quickly touch on the demo for a few seconds. That's right. So thanks very much, Greg. All right. So great.
Paul, I'm just going to reset the clock. You can go into this time here.
Okay. Thanks very much. All right. So when you go to changenexus.com, please, we're in alpha testing. All right. So if a user comes here, they want to get a user in ChangeNexus, they've got different options what they want to change. You can scroll to the bottom there, Greg. Thanks. So just there under professional, change in industry, change a supply chain, change an organization, and there personal, you want to change the world, you can do that. Okay, this is the engine for change. ChangeNexus is the engine for change. I'm going to swap over very quickly to an organizational view. So what we've got, it crashed. All right, so I'm going to talk through it if you don't mind. So very, very simply, corporations, enterprises work off a strategy, of course. In that strategy, they set the strategic objectives. And within the strategic objectives, basically, most of the time, it's about change. So for example, moving my tech to the cloud, that's a change. All right, so within ChangeNexus, you pull up or you create an organizational change order. It's got a budget. Based on the timeline of that organizational change order of, for example, moving your tech to the cloud, you'll get an annual change agenda with all of the organizational change orders. And basically, the executive change team takes ownership of delivering that organizational change. So you can imagine, for example, the President of the United States, he logs into ChangeNexus. He sets his locations of all the offices, the municipal offices across the US, and they start talking about strategic themes. They start talking about strategic objectives. There's obviously a causal relationship between your strategic themes and your strategic objectives. And everybody gets involved on the ChangeNexus. So there's a lot of contribution towards the change. Change agents can log in on mobile apps, on iPads, list impacts of changes, or of course generate new ideas for change using organizational change orders. Man, I'm trying to explain an end-to-end enterprise application here, which is hopefully going to contribute positively to the world, but I think you get the idea. So I'm going to stop there and take questions.
Okay, excellent. Paul, thank you so much. Who here likes change? Is that a hand up or is that a... Yes.
So I know we didn't get to see a lot of the demo with the dashboard and stuff, but do you feel like it's really that black and white? It seems like having a dashboard for change management makes it seem really easy. If I just put everything in here, change is going to happen. But I used to work at a Fortune 500 company that, change is really hard when you got a lot of people you're trying to move. So what do you see as kind of the bread and butter in your application that really propels people to make the change and not just go through the motions?
Thanks very much. So the answer to your question is very simple. The International Organizational Change Management Standards sets very clearly definitions of organizational change. So for the first time, we have got an auditable control framework for what needs to be done. So the definition, very, very briefly, organizational change management is the planning, leading, organizing, controlling of change. Now, anybody who's a management student understands that those are the 4 functions of management: plan, lead, organize, control. So when you take these 4 functions and you have a look at an end-to-end change process, it becomes very simple to control. You know what you need to do, you know who's involved, you've got your quality framework in place. It becomes a auditable process. As soon as something is auditable, it means that it's trackable. As soon as something is trackable, then it's just up to leadership to make sure that you're keeping those things on track. All right, so for me, it's not project management, it's management basic principles. If you're a good manager and you use ChangeNexus, you understand principles and practices of organizational change, it is simple.
Hi. So you mentioned measuring change. How are you measuring those metrics? And then when you pulled up your dashboard, it looked like you had country, region, community, and myself. Are there universal metrics across all those fields? What's that timeline like? Is there something specific that I guess you can drill down into and how you're measuring how successful this change is?
Great. So of course, executives have got very little time on their hands, so we had to find a way to make it really like a dashboard. All right, so one of the big drivers of change is, of course, impact. All right, so if you want to, for example, remove all the litter from the streets of San Francisco, that's a change you want. All right, so what's going to be the impacts? So one of the things is, for example, making sure that, that litter pins are not going to fall over. Right, so if you can change all the litter bins to make sure that they're safe from falling over and possibly the wind taking the litter out, what you're doing is you're saying, right, we've got 100 bins we have to replace. All right, then you've got somebody going out and replacing those bins and they're updating on their mobile app, okay, I've replaced 10 bins. Okay, so that means that on that particular organizational change order, we're 10% through on that particular item. So it's about measuring the impact of the change, and then by simply through almost task and activities management, feeding back into ChangeNexus what the progress is of that particular impact. So there's impact activities, there's also communication activities, there's also education and training activities. So for example, please don't use this bin for this kind of trash. Yeah, so that's an education thing. Communication, well, of course, please throw your trash in a dustbin. So all these things basically tie up into activities, and we link up with the United Nations Global Compact principles as well. So there's a measure of how your activities are rolling up to the United Nations Global Compact principles of sustainability. So that's all tied in. Nexus, by the way, is of course a word that says, hey, this is where it's all happening. It's all coming, it's all being tied up and managed from this point.
All right, Paul. ChangeNexus.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Lance.
Thank you.